The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, my name is Helen Dion. I am the Senior Marketing Manager at SWK Technologies. Welcome to our webinar, Sage HRMS Comprehensive Customizable HR Software, presented by Joe and Brian from Delphia Consulting. So before we hand it off to Joe and Brian, a little bit of housekeeping. So everyone's been placed on mute to keep any background noise down. However, you can still submit questions throughout the webinar. To submit a question, just look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar pod, and we'll try to answer those throughout the webinar, and we may hold off on some questions at the end as well. We are recording the presentation, and we will be distributing it tomorrow to all attendees, as well as anyone who registered but was not able to attend. With that said, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to attend our webinar. We're here to help you get the most out of your software solutions and help you find an easier way to run your business. We've invited Delphia Consulting here today because they're a wonderful partner of ours. They are the expert on all things Sage HRMS, as well as HCM software, best practices, and experts on what's happening in the HR industry. So if you have any questions, now is a great time to ask because we have some really great subject matter experts with us. So with that said, Brian and Joe, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you and welcome. It's nice to see some familiar names out in the attendee list today. So Anna, I think you've joined us before, so I'm thrilled to see you out there as an example, and hi to everyone else. I'm Joe Rotella, one of the co-hosts for today's webinar, and I'm joined by Brian Delphia, and we're going to try to cover everything we can in 1 hour about Sage HRMS, a comprehensive, customizable human capital management application. So first, just a little bit of background. I love this quote from Steve Wynn, that human resources isn't a thing we do, it's the thing that runs our business. The reality is that employees are the foundation of every successful business, and it's why human resource management is so important. But typically, we see kind of a hodgepodge of spreadsheets and Word docs and file folders on network drives and checklists. And we can eliminate all that with the right HR software. And sometimes you'll see that referred to as HRIS or HCM or HRMS, and I'll go over some of those definitions in a bit. But HR software, what it does and what it does really well is manage people data throughout the entire employment lifecycle, from recruiting all the way to separation. It can handle onboarding, payroll, self-service, performance management, analytics, and more. And that's going to save you time, which of course saves you money. And it's also going to let you spend that time to be more strategic in your efforts. So today we're going to cover 12 reasons why an HRMS is important and it's worth the investment. So let's cover a little bit about the agenda. First, we're going to give you a quick instant dive into Sage HRMS, and we're going to show you a COVID-19 return to work example. Then we'll come back, talk a little bit about recruiting and onboarding, a little bit about benefits management and reporting, including benefit enrollment options. We'll talk about compensation management. We'll talk about performance management, both types, both traditional and progressive, and then we'll share how you can get more information. But I'd like to begin by finding out, what HR software do you use today? So if you could take a minute and just give me an idea, you can select more than one of these. Is your system primarily based on Word docs, Excel docs? Do you really manage your people just through your payroll software? Maybe you use Sage HRMS, or maybe you use an HRMS from another publisher. So about almost half of everybody out there voted. If a couple more folks could just give me a clue what you use, that'll help guide some of our content this afternoon. In the spirit of saving time, I'm going to close out this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great responses from everybody. Let's see what we've got. So about a third of the folks are using Excel and Word, Office applications. Almost a fifth let their payroll software manage their HR data. Half use Sage HRMS, and about another fifth use an HRMS from another publisher. Now that adds up, of course, I think, I'd have to do the math, but I think we're over 100%. That's because we allow you to answer more than one question, right? So let's go back now and start and talk a little bit about Sage HRMS. So just to give folks an overview for the folks who aren't familiar with HRMS, Sage HRMS is what's called a best of breed platform That means you really select the modules that best meet your needs. It's software that manages and optimizes all of your routine HR tasks and overall the HR goals of an organization. Now, the core of it is Sage HRMS, the HR component. But then modules that you can add to that might cover, say, recruiting, onboarding, time and attendance, performance management, all the way to, say, analytics and reporting. But again, you pick the modules that best meet your needs. So today, if we talk about recruiting and you don't really hire a lot, that's not really important to you, listen a little bit, but you can even tune out a little bit because you wouldn't get that module, right? So you can pick and choose. Sometimes these modules come directly from Sage. Sometimes they come from Sage ISV Solutions. These are publishers who create add-ons for HRMS. So our role here today, Delphia, we've created more add-ons for HRMS than any other organization in the world. And some of those add-ons are endorsed by Sage. It means they have like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, except it's from Sage. So those are referred to as endorsed. And then sometimes you might even get a module that's not even in the Sage ecosphere, but it'll plug into this environment and play nicely with Sage HRMS. With the addition of these, say, add-ons or modules all around core HRMS, you really can cover all aspects of human capital management. And SWK is your key to success. They're the people you go to when you say, hey, we're looking to add this functionality or this module, and this module don't seem to be integrated as well as they could be. We need help. SWK solves all those problems. So now let's dive in and talk a little bit more about what is an HRMS. It is the place for employee data. So if you have an information architecture kind of background, you're familiar with the terms single source of truth or single point of truth. This is really the notion that you're structuring data so that any piece of data is mastered or edited or is owned by a single application, right? If you have other applications that use that data, the owner can share it out to those other systems, but there's one place to go, say in double quotes, to get the official word, right? That's the official data, that's the source, that's where we all go, everything's based on that. This really ensures that everyone is making decisions based on the same data. And when you share data from that single source out to other applications that need that data, you're avoiding duplicate data entry and then all the errors that could be associated with keeping data in sync across multiple systems. HRMS also, a key component would be employee and manager self-service. Now this saves time and it saves money, and reality is I think this is what people expect. I used to say this was really what we expected, just say in a white collar environment, but everybody now I think has a smartphone. You're used to shopping online. I know throughout this pandemic, I've shopped online, picked out the package, sent the package, tracked the package, sent an e-card. I did everything without ever talking to a person. And I can do it 24/7. Self-service really provides you with more accurate, transparent, and timely data. And when you give users the opportunity to make updates to that data, like change my emergency contacts or update my address, it really increases information accuracy. And of course, you're eliminating duplicate data entry because now you don't have someone, say, entering it in one place, someone copying it somewhere else, or worse yet, filling out a paper form, handing it to someone who then has to go type it into a system. Sage HRMS specifically is configurable, right? We can customize the menus. We can even add our own fields to Sage HRMS. So as an example, today, right now, out of the box, Sage doesn't really have a field to track, is someone vaccinated or not for COVID? So we could add that field, we'd call it a single field. But you may also want to track, are they testing every week or 2 weeks or whatever your need is? That would be what we'd call a multi-row field, right? Because you're going to have one row for every week or so that they test. We can also build user-definable forms and even workflows. It's comprehensive because it covers that entire employment lifecycle. And as I mentioned, it's modular, so you only license what you need. That means that Sage HRMS can grow with you as your needs change. If suddenly your recruiting is a big thing for you, then you could add that module. If your needs change and you say, hey, we're not really doing recruiting and don't expect to for a while, you might turn it off. So as an example, we've heard a lot about folks now having to track COVID-19 vaccination status and are they able to return to work. So Brian and I talked, and he's built an example here in less than an hour where he added that custom field to Sage HRMS. He built a form to let users use self-service to identify whether or not they're vaccinated. He can even report on it with Sage HRMS HR Analytics, and even send email reminders using alerts and workflow. All those names in the parentheses on the right are names of modules, and we're going to cover most of them today at a high level. But Brian built all that in less than an hour, and I know he's eager to show us what he's done and how it works. So Brian, can you fill us in on your COVID-19 return to work example?
Absolutely, and not only did I do it once, I'm going to do it again. We're going to start from scratch. So the first thing is that one of my favorite features about Sage HRMS is your ability to customize it and add a place to put data that you otherwise might be a little island of data outside of your HRMS system. And think about this COVID-19 example, perfect thing. When Sage developed Sage HRMS, they never thought about COVID. Maybe they could have done it based on the Spanish flu, but they didn't have the foresight. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Enterprise Setup, and I'm going to turn on a code table. So I'm going to come through here, and I'm going to add a custom code table, and I'm going to actually add two. The first one I'm going to do is weekly COVID testing, and then all I have to do is apply here and say okay. And the next one I'm going to add is going to be COVID vaccinations. Right, so then I'm going to do that, and you know what? I'm going to change the name of the previous one. Let's go back to okay. So this weekly COVID testing, I'm going to change. Well, it's okay. This is going to be tracking the result of the test. Okay. So the first step, if you're an existing user, you go to Enterprise and you say, I need to create these custom code tables. Second step is you go actually do it. So let's.
And then the cool thing about this is we're not thinking you're going to leave this knowing how to add these details, but to show you how flexible Sage HRMS is, right? Here's an immediate need, and in less than an hour, we can get that accomplished.
Right. So when you need to create a code table that's custom, you're going to go to Setup, Employees, User-Defined Code Tables. So here I'm going to pick the code that I'm looking for, and the first one is going to be the weekly COVID testing, and I'm going to add a code, and I'm going to call this test result. I'm going to call this negative, and we'll just call this negative. Say okay, and I'm going to add one more code for positive. Add. Hopefully we don't have many of those. Say okay. Whoops, I misspelled that, so I'll go back and fix it. So if you make a mistake like that, you're just going to come in here and go more, and you can come right back in here, and I need to positive. Did I spell that right? I'm not thinking clearly right now, Joe. Positive, yeah. Okay. All right. Now, that's the first code table. The next code table I want to create is going to be, let's see, where is it in my list? COVID vaccinations, right? So here in the US, we've got about 3 different vaccinations. We've got the Pfizer. I hope I spell all these right. This is the one I got. And then we're going to add another one. Add in the Moderna. Okay. And then let's not forget our friends over at Johnson & Johnson. I think that's the Janssen vaccine. It's 2 S's and 1 N. Okay,
And I think Pfizer description has an S instead of a Z, but no worries.
Okay. Well, you know what? Let's be good about it. This is being recorded, so let's be precise. Let's do.
And then the cool thing about this, Brian, is this something you would normally see an administrator like an HR person do, or their IT person, or do they go to their business partner like SWK, or who typically would do this kind of thing?
Well, Sage is designed so a typical HR person can be trained up on how to do this. It's really not that difficult. Generally, there'd be instructions for how you're doing it, but your business partner is always a resource. Sometimes you just don't feel like doing it and you want somebody to help you out, and that's cool too. Okay, so I've added my code tables. So the next thing I'm going to do is going to go to Setup and go back to System, and I'm going to go to, Setup and System, there we go. And I'm going to go to Custom Details. Now I'm going to add 2 different Custom Details tables here. The first one I'm going to add is going to be, just click Add for starters. And this one's going to be weekly COVID testing. That's my thing. And this is weekly, so I'm going to have more than one record. So this is going to be a multi-record. So I'll go ahead and say OK. And then when you do this, you just click where you want this to be on the page, where you want your field, and you say, I'm going to add a new field. So I'm going to come through here, and I think I did too quick. There we go. And click Add. Now, so I'm going to call this test date, and I'm just going to mark that as test. You know what? I'm going to put CV for COVID, and then test date. That's going to be a date field, and that's all I need there. So I say OK. And then I'm going to put another field on the form. So I click just in the white space below that, click Employee Custom Fields, click Add, and then I'm going to say test result. And here I'm going to say CV test RST, and this is going to be a code table. So I'm going to pick a code table, and then it's going to enable me to pick the code table I just did, which is my weekly COVID testing table, and I say OK. That's pretty simple, but that's all we need. All right, so then I'm going to say OK here. It's going to rebuild some indexes. Then I'm going to come back in, and I'm going to add another custom details page for just the vaccination status, more of a return to work example. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add. This one is not multi-row. It's just going to be a single page, and I'm going to call this COVID vaccine status. Check my spelling, Joe. I think that's vaccine status is proper. Okay. All right, now just again, click on the white space. Where do you want your first field to be? And I'm going to pick this one. It's going to say click Add. And the first thing I'm going to do is going to be first dose date. And then I'm just going to first dose date. I'm going to make this CV first. And that's going to be a date field, as the name implies. So I say OK. And then I'm going to put the second dose date. So I'm going to say OK, add. I'll put this as CV second. Make that a date, and then say OK. All right, now I want to know which vaccine am I getting, and actually I'm going to go add another date there. Let's put a booster. You know, we didn't think about that when we first created this form some time ago, but now we're going to put in the booster date that FDA ever approves it for everybody. So we'll call that CV boost. And that's a date. And there we go. Click OK. And the last field I need is, well, which vaccine did I get? So I'm going to click over here, and I'm going to say add. And here I'm going to say vaccine and CVVAC. And we're going to make that a pick list because we just added that. So it's a code table. And we're going to make this be the COVID vaccinations pick list. And that's it. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and say okay. And I'm going to go run a process in HR Actions real quick that will make HR Actions aware of those new fields. So I'm going to go in here to security and system settings and system parameters. We've got this section called manual updates. And that section option keeps all of the structures, the fields, the pick lists, the code tables, all those things in sync between HR Actions and Sage HRMS. Right.
And this is a really good example of the modularity of Sage HRMS, because just what Brian did so far without this HR Actions piece, that data is ready to be captured in HRMS. So if you had to, you could have paper forms and have people fill it out, and an HR person would, like Brian's doing, go over to the employee and see the tabs that it's got custom, and then he's going to pick custom details, and sure enough, the vaccine status is going to be there, and there's a page where somebody can enter that by hand. But it's 2021. We want to do stuff self-service rather than paper, and especially now when you have folks remote, hybrid work environments, things like that. We don't want to be having them, scan PDFs and sending in, or emails that someone has to type in. So what he's doing over in HR Actions is going to let him build a self-service form so that people can hit the web and self-identify. Yep, I got the vaccine. Here are my dates. So there's an example of how, you can stop at one point or keep going to really make it a wonderful employee experience.
But if you want to keep going, let's do that. So now if I go into HR Actions Admin proper, come on, let's get going in here. What is my system doing? Let's try this again. Oh, okay, so I'm already logged in. Okay, so let's back up here. Hopefully that finished running. I'm not certain if it did or not. Let's go ahead and see if I've added the field. So if I go to available fields in HR Actions, I should be able to come down here and have COVID vaccination. So I've just added a page to HRMS, and now HR Actions knows about it. So let's build a form real quick and use that form.
While Brian does that, HR Actions basically gives you all the fields that are in Sage HRMS, including payroll and including custom details like you saw. The only exception is kind of benefits and training. And as an administrator at 100,000 feet, you build forms by doing what Brian's doing now on this first tab, giving the form a name, and you can put some instructions and even have attachments if you want people to scan their vaccination card and attach it. Then you're going to get to a point where it's going to show you all those fields that are in Sage HRMS, and you just pick the ones you want on a form. So you're not buying a preset list of forms. You're not having to go to a programmer to make forms, or even your IT department. It's all just point and click going across those tabs at the top. Start with a form name. You can add dates and attachments. Now Brian's going to go down and say, hey, I want to pick these fields. These are the fields I want on my form. He can make them required. He can say it's okay if they're blank, leave them optional. And you just work your way down this process. And in the end, you're going to have a custom form available over the web for people to fill out, submit their data, and it'll automatically update Sage HRMS. No need to rekey this in. Everything's paperless.
So I'm going to make it so that we just add the weekly result. We're not going to see that this display if I'm a type of person that did not want to get vaccinated, but had covered by that Department of Justice or Department of Labor OSHA regulation. So let's keep going. And I just got to scroll through the rest of these fields. I'll get to the workflow part. So forms can have some level of workflow. I'll just have this go to probably HR. It's probably not the manager's business necessarily. And I'll just go ahead and say finish. And forms can also be turned on for different parts of the organization. I'm going to make this available to both of our US and our Canadian sample company here. All right, now, there you go. Now that form exists, so let's go use it. So I'm an employee. I can go to my actions, and if I go to start an action that applies to me, so now I'm over in self-service. I could have launched this through employee self-service message. You can get to HR actions that way. So here's my COVID return to work status form. I click submit. So I'm logged in as Veronica, and Veronica, let's see what she's done. She got her first dose in, let's say it was on May 1st or April 1st, and then her second dose was 3 weeks later. So we say the 22nd, and she hasn't gotten the booster yet, and she got the Pfizer vaccine. All right, and she could add that she did some weekly testing here. So she could come in through here and say, you know what, I got tested last Friday, and fortunately my results were negative. All right, now I can initiate this action. Now I'm going to just speed this process along. So in administration, I'm going to actually save that action to HRMS administratively, bypassing the approval process. So if I go to, let's see, that'll be active actions. And there's the COVID test. So I'm just going to go ahead and approve for all remaining approvers. And this is a demonstration of how this works. Normally you'd put a comment that would get emailed to the approver that you're approving for. Now, here's what's really cool. If in analytics, I have a custom report.
Now, Brian, did that flow right into Sage HRMS?
It did. It's right in the Sage HRMS. We're going to go look at that in a second. But before that, I wanted to show the analytics part of this. So we have the ability, while that comes up, I'll go ahead and go over here. If I cancel out of this and go back up and search for an employee, let's see, do advanced find to find Veronica Bell, who's.
So what Brian's using right now is Sage HRMS, but this is typically only used by an HR person.
So here in Veronica's COVID record, it, oh, duh, I didn't save it. I approved it. One last step, it did not. No, I answered your question improperly, Joe. It did not. It went to pending actions. Now you could set this form up so that as soon as it got approved, it went ahead and saved into HRMS, but I have to click this little save disk because I didn't set it up to autosave. Now if I go back to HRMS and I were to go back a person and then come forward, there you go. She got the Pfizer on 4/1, got her booster here, and I could come over to close this one and go back into that and go to custom details for Veronica. Go to the custom details page, and I would be able to also see that she got tested last week. She got tested on this date and the results were negative. Now over under analytics, we automatically build reports for anything we've added custom details wise. So I've got my COVID vaccine status report. I would expect two records here, the one I entered manually and the one I just processed an action for. So that's going to come up in a sec. What's really nice about these custom details is you have the ability to relocate them someplace else on the analytics menu. And there's my two people, this one and that one right there. and I can see other people haven't had their dosage yet at all. And then the other report will just have one record because it just has the one entry where Veronica got tested last week. So a couple other things I didn't mention here: you can create checklists and you can do email alerts with Microsoft or with Sage HRMS alerts that you can communicate, hey, we didn't get your test results. If it's somebody who's refusing to get the vaccine, we didn't get your test results, or just an email saying, hey, we don't know about your vaccination status from our return to work policy. Would you please fill out this form? So Joe, that was a very brave attempt on my part to actually build everything that we talked about from scratch live.
In about 15 minutes. So the key there was to just give you a really quick glimpse of Sage HRMS. You saw that's where Brian added the custom fields and where he searched for Veronica and saw her data. You got to see how you can build custom forms. You got to see how end users can take a form, fill it out, how it can route for approval and flow right into Sage HRMS. And behind the scenes, as he mentioned, there could be alerts going off, sending text messages, emails, you name it, to remind people, to let people know results, you know, all without any manual intervention. So now let's deep dive a little bit further into the whole employment lifecycle. And some of these will be shorter on demo-wise because we have to wrap up in a half hour, right? So we're gonna start with onboarding with core Sage HRMS. So I think, Brian, you're a bit ahead of the game there.
How did I jump so far ahead?
You're eager. You're just flying through it.
There we go. Is this the right
So
slide?
let's talk about onboarding. This is where you're introducing a new hire into your organization. Now, out of the box, you'll have Sage HRMS. That's really the database, right, where you're going to track information. And you could hand folks a new hire packet, maybe that has your handbook acknowledgement, your media policy, your OSHA policies and stuff. People will sign that they read them, and then you'll manually go type those in, just like Brian manually typed in the vaccination status for one of those employees, not Veronica, I forget the other guy's name. In that user interface of Sage HRMS, there are workflows that will guide you through tasks to get this done. So there's actually a task that says record a new hire, and it's step-by-step going to help the HR person fill in that data. There's a task that says update status, where you could update they saw the handbook and acknowledgement and things like that. Usually these are presented as a checklist to help expedite and standardize the process. You can even take tasks and schedule them for a future date, or even to be completed by another team member, someone else, say, on the HR team. So that's what you get out of the box, but you can level up and start really expanding on the capabilities that are here. So when we look at that, we're thinking about recruiting options. Here, you could have an integrated applicant tracking system, or ATS. So there are two that work exceptionally well with Sage HRMS, but pretty much any of them you can use, right? There's iRecruit for Sage HRMS, that's cloud-based, and there's Cyber Recruiter, that can be cloud-based or on-premise. And then you could use HR Actions. What Brian just showed you that built that web-based form for COVID could build a web-based form of I acknowledge the handbook, I know the media policy, all of that stuff. It also can have your I-9 and your W-4s built right in as paperless forms. In the case of recruiting, HR Actions will even connect to your applicant tracking system using either a REST API or a CSV export-import and pull in the data from your applicant tracking system and put it right on a new hire form. Now, if you say, we hire some, but we don't really need a full-blown ATS, you can even use HR Actions to build a simple little form that you put on your website to collect what it says, a basic online application, and that'll pull right into a new hire interface. So the whole key here is I want to eliminate that paper application, and I want to eliminate retyping from some recruiting system into Sage HRMS. So here are some best practices. These are the most effective way to get the job done. For your new hire process, if you do a lot of hiring and you're using an ATS, integrate with it. Connect it to Sage HRMS. And what's cool is from that new hire form, data can flow right into Payroll. So it has templates that can do all the codes for taxes and things like that. You can automatically notify people that, hey, we're hiring somebody. So as an example, automatically send an email to IT that says, hey, we're hiring Sally. Here's the access she needs to different parts of the network. Here's her phone. Here's her email. She needs a workstation. So all those manual emails you send when you hire someone, you can do it automatically. Users can log into employee self-service for the first time. on their own and set up a password. You don't have to do it for them. And then give them that paperless onboarding packet. Dynamically assign them the right forms that should be in their packet. So an I-9, whatever W-4 is right for them based on where they live, a direct deposit form. You can even embed videos to really boost the whole feeling, get some engagement early on, right? Take advantage of multimedia over the web. And you can even monitor progress as you go through it. So Brian, maybe you can give us a short example of how a new hire form works and how you get someone into Sage HRMS.
Absolutely. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into HR Actions Self-Service, and I'm going to do this as a manager. And I'm going to start in actions for people who I manage or about to manage because they're a new hire. I'm going to pick a new hire form, and the first thing I'm going to do is to go into. I'm going to use the example with payroll fields. All right, so I'll go ahead and click submit. Now, what will happen here is I've already pre-populated this, but there'll be a pick list right here that will have the name of your applicants, whether they came from CyberRecruiter, iRecruit, or your favorite applicant tracking that you happen to interface, right? We'll bring the data down. And when I select that, I've simulated this for expediency of this demo, it'll bring in the information that was collected on the application. What's also nice here is I can go through and let me just change the social security number so it's unique. And you know, you're never going to collect everything you need to know about in an application. So I'm going to go ahead and put this person's in a particular city, and for whatever reason, my unit pay rate is out of place up here, but I'll put that in there. And when I go and click Save Draft to continue, and this is important for those of you that might have Sage 300 payroll or Sage HRMS payroll, it's going to go through, and based on the fact that this person is going to be working in San Francisco, it's going to automatically know that these are the taxes, federal and state and local, San Francisco regular, and the earnings codes that we want to add for that employee. So if I initiate this action, when this gets saved to HRMS, it will update the payroll records automatically, so you don't have to open payroll in order to get the person over into payroll, and then it'll update HRMS as well. So I'm not going to do that just for the expedience of today's webcast. I'm going to go ahead and log out of here, and I'm going to do my next piece here through Sage Self-Service to demonstrate how HR Actions operates seamlessly within the framework of Sage Self-Service, providing the employees a single place to look and access their critical HCM type applications. So as this thinks about waking up here on my little server, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to log in as E. Woods, which is a brand new hire, and put in her password. And when a brand new person logs in, the content on self-service is going to look a little skinny. They're brand new. They don't have any paid time off yet, or they don't have any benefits. They just got hired today. So I'm going to go over it to a custom menu here called My Required Actions. And when I do that, it's going to launch a dynamic checklist, and it's going to be unique based on where I am. Notice that the tax form is the California DE4. That's because this person was hired into San Francisco. So the first thing I always like to do is, you know, they typed in their data on the applicant tracking system. Let's give them a chance to create a form that might update that information in case they got anything wrong. Or we can actually capture some additional information, say, for example, emergency contact or education or previous employment, if that didn't already get caught through the applicant tracking system. Then I'm also able to, once I initiate that action and it didn't like something, it says my effective date is necessary. So I'll go ahead and do that. Very good. So now I can go back to my actions requiring my input, go back to my checklist. I can see that the first item is routing. I can go ahead and do something like complete the federal W-4. Right, so we have all of the federal, only one federal W-4, but we also have all of the state forms as well. So I'm going to come through here and say I am single, and that's about all I want to do. I'm going to go ahead and say Ellen Woods, it's my name. If I don't remember my name, it's always going to be convenient for the employee because it does have to match for our verification of electronic signature. So that's okay. Now, if I go down to the bottom and I click Save Draft to Continue, it'll update the actual W-4 form, right? And it will put whatever statuses I filled out. It's saying I'm single, and if I put in additional amounts, it would fill this out. When this gets saved to HRMS, it will save all the way over into the tax record, and then it can even insert the tax record on that employee's account. And the same thing holds true to Sage 300 payroll. If you have Sage 100 payroll, we use a visual integrator job to update this tax information on over into that. So I can continue down the process of having the employee fill out all of this information. What's nice is in this little view of this checklist, both the manager and HR has the ability to visually see this in the same interface and report on it. So Joe, back to you.
Well, can I ask you just to click on I-9, because that's my favorite form.
Oh, okay. Let me go back, click on I-9. Right, so I-9 can work several ways. You can have either the employee start it if you think they're going to be able to handle the section 1, or you can just have the person who might be doing the examination of the documents do it, and they would also fill out the preparer translator. So as required, you can jump to the instructions. I can jump to the form. You can attach the documents. If you're using a iPad, this works really nicely remotely. You can actually use the camera feature on the iPad to take the picture and then attach it. So here the employee would fill out or correct their information. Hopefully at this point in the onboarding process, we've got their name and address proper. They would come through and they would just have to read the instructions. It's the I-9 form. It takes a little bit of thought. And then I would say, so I'm a US citizen, that makes it easy. I would come through here and then I have to type in Ellen Woods. And I would say that let's continue. I'm doing this. Now, if I used a translator, I would click this and say how many, but I would say I didn't use a translator, and the employee is instructed to stop here. Now, if this were the manager or an HR person who would do this, they'd be doing this and they would come through here, and this would be checked as I use the translator. They'd put in their information, and then they could continue on to do the examination of documents in this one sitting. So if I save draft to continue, just so that everything gets refreshed and updated, and then I jump down to the form, you'll see that it's updated the form. And we do it nicely. We avoid lots of penalties because all those little fields that they say you can't leave them blank. You have to put N/A in there, or there's a cha-ching to the government on the fines if you ever get an audit. So it's automatically filled out, and then once the preparer translator section is filled out, that'll be filled out as well if that were completed. And then once the examination of the documents, all of this information will get filled out as well. So that's in a real quick overview, the I-9 form, Joe.
So now let's talk a little bit about benefits management. So out of the box, Core HRMS tracks your benefits, things like the premium costs, the employee contributions, coverage amounts, beneficiaries, their dependent coverage, even COBRA. There's also the ability to deal with ACA compliance. So you can proactively monitor compliance with MIME Workforce Analyzer, even generate your 1094C and 1085C forms. There's a really nice integration with Payroll as well. So it's going to send over to Payroll the employee deductions and contributions, even handle taxable excess life, because that is imputed income. When it comes down to benefits reporting, here we want to effectively use the data that we have in Sage HRMS, that single point of truth. So out of the box, we have standard reports built right into Sage HRMS, even a total compensation letter. But I always like to give folks examples where they can level up and kind of take it to the next level there. So inside of Sage HRMS Employee Self-Service, an employee can see their current enrollments. You can even have links to plan documents and carriers. Then there's some add-ons. So Delphi has produced some pretty robust compensation letters that you could use if you're not satisfied with the compensation letter that's inside Sage HRMS. You've got benefit reports, analysis, and dashboards with the analytics tool. And just new this summer, we announced arrears management. So that's benefit arrears reporting provided by analytics. The output is a catch-up deduction file, a CSV, based on the rules. And you can, of course, import that right into time cards that'll flow right through the whole payroll processing system. You've got several options when it comes to benefit enrollment, how you sign up, and that should be on everybody's mind now, right? Open enrollment is typically every fall. So out of the box, you could do the traditional paper-based, get everybody to fill out those forms, then manually enter them into Sage HRMS, or you could level up. When you have Sage Employee Self-Service, you can add HRMS benefits enrollment. That'll do open enrollment and life events. It updates Sage HRMS with that data. Of course, you have to get the data out of HRMS over to your carrier. Well, Sage Benefits Messenger handles that. It transfers the enrollment over to the carriers. And if you want, you can even use a third-party portal. That's really common right now because the portal provides user enrollment experience that's typically pretty robust. The portal handles communication with the carrier, but then you have to get it from the portal into HRMS. Well, remember, we don't want to take and type all that in again. So we have an interface, bi-directional. You can upload a census file to your portal. You can download the enrollment options or selections, load them right into HRMS. So Brian, you want to give us a very quick glimpse into some of how enrollment works, and then we'll move on to compensation and then performance management.
Yeah, what I'm going to show here is just the option available if you have a third-party portal, right? So this is an example of a integration tool. Let me just maximize that so it looks easier. All right. So what this is going to enable us to do is import from the provider, from the benefit portal, the data, and it'll go right into your Sage HRMS benefit tables, and it'll create the little history records before it does the update. So the first thing we do is we go out here and we would find a file. So I'll do just an example file, and then what we do is we say import benefits, and it's going to show you which benefits you just imported. The next thing we're going to do, you go to validate, and you click the validation button, and most of these are you want this result. No validation issues found, right? Otherwise, we'd produce a report that would say these are the issues you have, and you want to fix them before you import them. And then the third option is to simply load it to HRMS, and it just says I've just updated 3 insurance records and updated 3 I've added 3 new records and updated 3 records. So if you're using a portal, or if you somehow have your benefits in a spreadsheet, this is a way to spare you the time to update the benefits. And that's, that's usually a crunch. You are doing your last payroll of the year, it's the holidays, you really want to get prepared for New Year's, and you can use this tool right after you run your last payroll for these, using those old rates, and before you run the payroll for the new rates. So Joe?
So now we're going to jump into compensation management. This is really administering everything of financial value that's exchanged for work. So out of the box, Sage will track, of course, next pay review date, next performance review date. You can have pay grades, and there's associated with job codes. You can even level up and do things like email reminders. You can have a pay review due report. You can have a pay change form, even a checklist for managers if you've got forms they've got to fill out, maybe to promote someone or transfer someone or do their performance review. So Brian, I thought originally we were going to demonstrate a little bit of payroll. Do we have time for that, or you want to jump right to performance management?
I can do something really quick, but I know we're running out of time. So if I go into reporting, and the neat thing about analytics is it will it's available for managers, not just HR. So it's really nice is everything you're seeing here, I'm logging in as my HR person. A manager can log in and just see their reports, right? So up under analytics, under total rewards, compensation, there's a whole litany of reports out here, but one of them is real simple. It's like there's a pay review due, right? So if I click on that pay review due, pay reviews due report, then, and this shows the tight integration, oh my gosh, Susan Reed needs her review, And if I'm the manager or an admin, I can click on this pay status change form and literally right from the report launch into a form that will create an action that I can say this person's going to get a 3% increase, and notice that the effective date automatically defaulted to today's. And it even tell you you can't do two of these at the same time. So we'll save that draft as continue, and I'll let you continue on to performance management, Joe.
So when we talk about performance management, it's really all about creating an environment where people can perform their best. So out of the box, of course, you have paper performance review forms, and you can enter those into HRMS. HRMS tracks 3 dates about when you've had a review, when your next review is done, and so on. Or you could level up and go paperless with HR Actions and get progressive performance management with Maviva. So let's talk a little bit about the details here. When we talk about performance management, there are 2 approaches, traditional and progressive. So traditional is really where you sit down, set goals, typically 6 months later, you have a formalized meeting where you did a mid-year review, then the end of the year you do the formal review. It's typically top down, it's pretty linear. Things don't change much except in those kind of ritualized meetings. You monitor the progress, and there's really 2 reviews, right? Mid-year and end of year. Progressive is where everybody's headed, or has been for about the last 5 years. This is called continuous performance management. It's very agile. It's flexible, and you can adapt your goals based on current needs of the organization. Think of last year when suddenly in March we had to change goals because everybody was, working from home and COVID happened, right? It's a collaborative approach to goal setting. There's continual feedback and coaching and real-time conversations or check-ins with folks. Now with Sage HRMS, really you can do both, right? So if we look at the traditional approach, you build a form with HR Actions. It has your questions. It could be initiated by the employee if you want to do self-reviews, or the manager. You have open questions where the manager can update a question, comments, ratings. You can bounce back and forth between the employee and the manager. When it's done, the form's initiated, goes through the workflow, the little routing slip. All done, it updates Sage HRMS. Progressive, similar, but you're using another tool, Maviva, also published by Delphia. That stands for Mission, Vision, and Values, to set goals, track progress, and capture those conversations, those check-ins every day if you'd like, as often as you'd like. They'll all flow right into the form that you built with HR Actions, just like we talked about over on the traditional side. When you're all done, the form still updates HRMS. So I want to show you both. Let's start with the traditional one. So we're going to focus here. This is where you set goals, then you do a mid-year review, then you do an end-of-year review. Let's look at that briefly. Then we'll look at Maviva, and then I think we're done and ready to wrap up.
Okay, so the first one I'm going to show you is the traditional. So I'm going to go over here into HR Actions, and let's see what I can find here as far as a performance appraisal here. So let's see. Manage. Okay, so here we have a performance appraisal for Joseph Black, and I'm logged in as Veronica, so this is people I'm managing. Joe Black reports to me. So let's go ahead and just edit this, and we'll just sort of walk through the various capabilities you have. The first thing is, as Joe mentioned, you have the ability to set the next pay review, and we even have the ability to take your numeric rating of a performance appraisal and translate it back to the code table that's in HRMS, and then of course document the date the performance appraisal took place. So here's an example of a section. We have a section for managing competencies. This is pretty well completed for both the manager and the employee, and you can see that we're tracking the manager and the employee rating on a scale of 1 to 5. You can have question weighting, you can have section weighting, you can be predefined, or the manager can deal with it. So this is what we call a question. It has a manager response, employee comment or response, and then a rating. Now, because I'm looking at this from the managers, the employee's already done it. They didn't put it in a comment, but they just said they exceed standards. So then the manager would put their rating, and you can have as many well, not as many, but there are up to 20 sections and 80 questions. So pretty much as many questions as you want to tolerate on a performance appraisal. You also have the ability to set goals. And this is an example of what I refer to as an open question. In other words, the manager may not have been doing this last year, so the goals get carried over, which is a possibility. So the first time around, they had to say, well, the goals for this year were, and then ask the employee to rate themselves, and the manager would rate them as well. One of the cool things about this is our ability to volley back and forth between the employee and the manager. Now, I can tell because this score for the employee is already done that this has already been sent to the employee. But when the employee gets it, it looks about the same as this, and this button would say send to manager. So they can volley back and forth until they're happy with it. You can also, I didn't add any multi-raters, but this would say send a multi-rater. So a manager can request the feedback from other individuals. But I'm just going to go ahead and save draft and continue. And Joe, did you want to present some information on Moviva before I demonstrate that portion?
Yep, just a little bit.
Okay.
So that's a traditional approach, just as that reminder, right? That was traditional, the kind of 2 ritualized meetings a year. Now I want to talk a little bit about progressive. And remember, the key difference here is that a progressive approach, you're setting goals, tracking progress, and capturing ongoing comments the whole time. So next 2 slides, Brian, if we talk a little bit about Moviva. Moviva is all about that setting goals, lots of check-ins, and doing an evaluation. And then every now and then, you kind of veer off this wheel and create an artifact with HR actions, the standard performance review form. So the key here is setting near-term goals. Those typically align to other goals or big rocks if you're an EOS person. You can even align goals to competencies and values. You can present their job description. You have those regular check-ins, and then you produce the artifact. So maybe you can give us a quick glimpse into a little of Moviva, Brian.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'm not going to get into Moviva proper, but I'll go ahead and show you how we can harvest all of those check-ins week in and week out to make the performance appraisal process, that annual process, which you still want to document things, but it's really just memorializing or creating an artifact based on all of the week in, week out conversations. So I'm going to go ahead and do something for a gentleman by the name of Hugh Allen, I believe it is. And if I go into Hugh's record, I'm going to go into forms, and I'm going to pick a performance appraisal form that, let's see. Oh, Joe, where's the Moviva form here? Oh, there it is. Okay, just staring right at it. Okay, so when I submit this form, it's going to look like any other performance appraisal. It's going to look like a traditional performance appraisal form. But I'm going to say I want to measure progress from, I'll just go ahead and type that in, 1/1/2020 to 12/31/2020, right? And when I do that, it goes and calculates, and it'll come back and think one more time and look at what it has done. It has brought in all sorts of data. It's brought in the basics of a goal for Q4. That this is a quantitative goal, and it's put in the comments that were captured during various check-in sessions. And here's my goal for the Q3. Right, and it's showing me the actual results, and that's not very good. This is, of course, play data. And this is a hyperlink back to Moviva, so I can actually launch into the application and see it. So we have the ability to have categorizations of goals. Company goals, above here were my individual goals. You could also have a job description. You can have sections for where I helped other people with goals. I could have my core competencies. These are all components that are built and tracked right into Moviva. But what's nice about this is it allows an annual artifact to be created quickly but with a lot of meaning, a lot of comments that were created throughout the appraisal cycle of the whole
And,
year.
you know, it doesn't have to be annual. You could do it 90 days. You could do it every
Mhm.
day if you want. Push the button and start the form.
Absolutely.
So we were almost done here with our hour. I hope this gave you a really good, kind of very big picture image into Sage HRMS, that best of breed platform where you select the modules that best meet your needs to cover the entire employment lifecycle. We can't cover all of it in detail in an hour, but hopefully you saw bits and pieces that whet your appetite. I do want to invite you, though, to get more information. If you'd like to register for one of our upcoming demos of Sage HRMS, I've got a couple on the calendar. On October the 5th, we're going to do one specifically dedicated to Sage HRMS and how it works with Sage 100 Cloud. That's at 1 o'clock. On November 2nd, same thing, but how it integrates with Sage 300 Cloud. Maybe you just can't wait. And if you want someone to talk to you about HR software now, then there's that box. Or, you know, no, I'm cool. So if you could just let me know if you'd like me to register you for any of these upcoming events, or you want someone to call you right away because you can't wait, you can check, well, all that apply, but you know, typically you're only going to do the 100 or the 300, not both. But if you want to come to both, you're more than welcome. So just go ahead and let me know what's right for you. And in the interest of time, we've got just a couple more things to cover. I'm going to have to close this out soon in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I really appreciate that. Now I've got just a couple resources for you, and then we'll wrap it up. So we'll go fast here. If you're interested in learning more about how time and attendance systems work with Sage HRMS, here's a link to a recorded webinar where we're going to cover time and attendance for Sage HRMS, Sage 100, and Sage 300. That play button is the video. That stack of papers will give you the handout. After that, we have one that's all about Sage HRMS Payroll. So if you want to learn more about the Payroll module, if you want to stick with the Sage one and you're not using, you know, 100 or 300 or who knows what, here you can learn all about Payroll. This is Sage HRMS Payroll for flexible payroll for mid-sized organizations. Again, a video and a stack of handouts. Then we have HR Analytics. That's the web-based dashboards, reporting, and analytics tool for Sage HRMS, so you can check that out. And then a key feature of analytics is something called analysis grids. So analysis grids really provide, I think of it as kind of like Star Trek-y, right? Where you get all the data and you say, take in this column, take out that column, filter on this. So we have a whole video dedicated to that. And then lastly, this is one of my favorite applications. This is Sage HRMS Alerts and Workflow. This is a business application monitoring system. I like to call it yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo, because that's just what it does. It can look at a database, not only Sage HRMS, but pretty much any data source in your whole enterprise. So you can use additional licensing to point this to anything. And then based on conditions it sees, you can say, hey, when you see this, send an email, include this data. When you see this, send a text message, and so on. So all that reminder stuff, notification stuff that you might be doing by hand, we can automate with Sage HRMS Alerts and Workflow. With that, I thank you for attending today. I'm going to turn it back over to Helen for any housekeeping. I don't see any questions. I think we answered ones that came in that I saw fly in, so I think we're good to go. But Helen, back to you.
Thanks so much, guys. Great job. Very thorough. So like I said, we have experts on the line. If you have any questions, I know it's past the webinar time. So if you have to head out, please feel free to do so. But on that note, thanks everyone for joining us. Very informative with Delphia Consulting. Love to have you guys on. Always great to hear what you guys have to share about Sage HRMS. So thanks everyone and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye for now.